going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a newer release, the Bob's Burgers movie. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie-related content on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time, and let's talk about the Bob's Burgers movie. This sees the Belchers try to save their restaurant from closing as a sinkhole forms in front of it, while the kids try to solve a mystery that could save it. Series creator Lauren Bouchard also co-wrote and co-directed this, sharing the latter duties with Bernard Derriman, who's also a producer on the show, and this was easily one of my most anticipated movies of the year, which I'm sure you probably didn't hear all that often for this one. But I am a big fan of Bob's Burgers. I watched the show to this day. It's not quite as funny as it once was, as it's more just amusing now, but I still thoroughly enjoy watching it. I love the fast-paced, rapid-fire sense of humor, and I love all these characters and this voice cast. My only hesitation for this movie going in is that I do think this show is past its prime, and that sense of it running out of steam might carry over to this. But the other thing that I kept in mind is the fact that I had similar feelings going into another movie based on a Fox-produced animated show, which is the Simpsons Movie, which by the time that was out, the show was already past its glory days, and yet that wound up being the best piece of Simpsons media in quite some time, and it still is to this day as far as anything past that show's glory days, but that's a different story. Though either way, I was holding out hope that this was simply going to be in a similar situation, and sure enough, that's ultimately how I felt about this. I absolutely love this movie. It is the definition of an all-around delightful experience, and I just had a big smile on my face, laughing very consistently the entire time. Like, it just gave me everything I was hoping for it to be, and rarely do I feel films completely live up to that. Now, it's worth noting, your enjoyment of this is mostly going to be based on how you already feel about the show itself. I've heard a few people who weren't as big of a fans of the show say they actually enjoy this, even if they didn't love it, so if you're also not a fan of the show, you might find yourself pleasantly surprised. But for the most part, the only way I can see anyone else truly loving this movie is if they actually already really enjoy the show, even if, like myself, they think it's not quite as good these days. Because this is essentially just one giant extended episode of the show. There are certainly some higher stakes than what we're typically used to. There's this inclusion of more characters than normal in one story, but at the end of the day, it keeps things pretty contained to most of the usual areas in which the Belchers reside. And even though it creates bigger conflict, the events in question don't feel out of place with this universe. Nor did you see these characters essentially go against who they are because they need to deviate from the formula to have a bigger story or anything. Everyone acts exactly in line with how they are in the show, with all their usual quirks and shticks all right out in the forefront. And if anything, I honestly could have even seen this cut up into 3 episodes and playing as the finale to one of the seasons or something. And if you're totally good with that, you're going to love this movie. I've heard some people use that fact, that it feels like an extended episode of the show, almost as a criticism against it. And to a degree, I get it, because there have been movies where it'll feel cheap because it's clearly like a few episodes packaged together with some added material, and it doesn't have the emotional weight that would feel required with a cinematic experience. But the thing with Bob's Burgers is, there's always been plenty of heart and charm injected into each and every episode. Even in their weaker episodes, despite the fact that the Belchers get into some serious hijinks and they always find ways to agitate one another, they're still a loving, caring family at the end of the day, and you get just as much of that charm and heart, if not more, here. Now, don't go into this expecting like the profound emotional depth that you get in like a Pixar movie. I think that's part of where I think the criticism of it feeling like an extended episode of the show is coming from. Because even when Bob's Burgers the show lays on the emotions a little thick, it's not looking to cut you that deep or stray too far from being comedic. Like, you'll still have characters cracking jokes during these emotional moments, but because of how much you like these characters, it also works at still feeling emotional, and that's the same thing here. It definitely expands a little more on its emotional side because we are in a movie, but it's also not going to have characters start doing things that feel so out of their normal comfort zone that it doesn't feel like them. If this was acting as a series finale to the show and we're seeing everyone learning what the next step in their lives are or something, then Sure, yeah, I can see that. But the show's still going on, and this is meant to just be another wacky adventure for the Belchers, just on a bigger scale. Like, you'll especially see that a lot in movies based on a TV show, where characters who are normally close in the show will split apart for a period of time in the second act of the film, so that we can then have this huge, overblown makeup part going into the third act, and it's all cheesy and overly sentimental. And it usually accomplishes this by totally disrupting the normal dynamic. The most recent example I can think of is the animated Addams Family 2 from last year, where you had Wednesday just despise her parents for like the majority of the movie and get into arguments with them, among a number of other convoluted subplots, but it was done as a way to have this huge emotional moment later on that just didn't work. Not that I want to turn this into a comparison game or anything, but like I even said in my review of that movie that no one wants to see an Addams Family movie just for the family to argue, especially when they're known for loving one another. And that's the same with Bob's Burgers. I mean, yeah, they find ways to annoy each other or be bothered by something the others do, and that causes conflict, but it's not to the point that it causes this major rift. Like, if anything, it's maybe to a very slight degree. Like, you have this subplot here where Louise gets called a baby, and that bothers her through the entire movie, to the point that she gets self-conscious about her bunny ears and the fact that Linda calls her her baby. And it's a well-done subplot because it brings a little more emotion to the storyline, and it does cause some tension, but it's also not taken to the point where Louise suddenly hates Linda or the rest of the family or anything, and it causes this huge rift where she just wants to be completely apart from them for like half the movie or something. It's handled in a manner almost exactly like how it would have been dealt with in the show, and for that, I appreciate that storyline. Now, the only other major upping of stakes where it's a little grander than the show is that the film brings in a murder mystery storyline where a skeleton is found in the sinkhole and it's discovered to be the body of this murdered carnival worker, and Mr. Fischoeder is accused of being the murderer. And the kids are bent on proving his innocence because if he goes to jail, that would also be a major factor playing into the restaurant getting closed. And again, it was all really well done. Similar to the Louise Hat storyline, even though there's still a little more weight to it, it's still filled with all the usual Belcher hijinks, which in turn would make it just a blast to watch while we all try to figure out who this murder truly is. And for what it was, the murder mystery part of the story was actually pretty engaging for what it was. I mean, it wasn't overly complex or anything, but they put enough thought into it that it was fun to follow just in and of itself. But this part of the movie centered on all three kids together, and typically in the show, the three of them on adventures would result in some of the best moments of rapid-fire back-and-forth exchanges, as you have Tina with her deadpan delivery, and Gina and Louise have so many great quips ready to go, and you get like 10 memorable lines within the span of like 30 seconds. Once again, that's the case here. Now, I mean, Bob, Linda, and Teddy all also have a lot of laugh-out-loud hilarious moments and have just as much screen time of trying to sell extra burgers with this makeshift hot dog cart that Teddy put together. But I think in terms of the best throwaway lines, those typically come from the three kids. We have plenty of moments of just the three of them playing off one another, getting in little jabs, or making these offhand remarks, sometimes even in the most dangerous of situations, like if they're spying on someone or if they're getting chased or whatever it is. And it's all really funny, and it was very consistent. In fact, the film as a whole is easily the funniest I've seen from anything Bob's Burgers related in a while. The dialogue for everyone was sharp as ever, and as I said, while there were plenty of grand laugh-out-loud moments that got some belly laughs out of me, there were also plenty of great throwaway lines peppered all throughout this. And they'd be said so offhandedly that I'd have a delayed reaction every so often, which was always the beauty of that show, and in turn this movie. The amount of hidden jokes and seemingly throwaway lines in like nearly every frame was genuinely impressive. Even if you looked at posters on the wall or signs for storefronts, everything was some sort of clever pun, and I was having a blast just looking for all of them, some of which would be in like the finest of print. Like, I specifically want to go back to this just so I can catch all the little things I missed out on. And to be quite honest, I had minimal issues with this movie. If I had to nitpick a few things here and there, I did maybe feel that runtime like once or twice towards the middle going into the final act, but it was by like a smidge. I never actually really felt bored with this movie. I just think there were like a few brief instances in the build up to its final reveal that I think could have been tightened up just slightly, but that might be something that will go away on repeat viewings. The only other thing was I was also slightly mixed on the musical aspect, because this is technically a musical and we get these old-time show-stopping numbers in a very similar style to what you hear over the end credits of the show. But there's only like 3 songs in the movie, with 2 at the beginning and 1 halfway through. And even though the songs weren't like the catchiest, they were still funny. It just felt inconsistent in the frequency in which they were used. But again, it's not that big of a deal, and I was still thoroughly entertained either way. And otherwise, honestly, this was easily one of my favorite movie experiences of the year. I feel like you're not going to hear that all too often when it comes to this, though. A lot of people like it, but I don't feel like I've heard people say they love it. But for me, this was just a really good time at the movies with characters that I've already grown to love through this TV show. I understand it might not be what some think as some sort of cinematic achievement, and again, a lot of this is going to come down to how much you already like the show. But honestly, not everything needs to feel like it's this pristine, immaculate work of art in order to provide such an emotionally satisfying experience. Sometimes it can keep things pretty contained and it's still an absolute blast. And for me, this was an emotionally satisfying experience just for how charming, delightful, and very, very funny it was. It gave me essentially everything I was looking for, so I was really happy. The Bob's Burgers movie might just feel like an extended episode of the show, and part of your enjoyment's going to come down to how much you already like the show. But for me, this was exactly what made it such a delightful, fun-filled experience. It's filled with all the usual hijinks, rapid-fire jokes, awkward humor, and loads of throwaway lines that the show's known for, mixed in with its usual heart and charm that has us smiling from ear to ear. This time it's just on a slightly grander scale. But either way, it still works wonders. I know it's not going to be what everyone thinks of as some new animated classic, but it gave me exactly what I wanted, and for that, it made for easily one of my favorite movies of the year so far. The Bob's Burgers movie gets a 9.5 out of 10. So let me know, did you see the Bob's Burgers movie, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Are you a fan of the show, and what's a good movie based on a show that you like? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.